football fans. Welcome to the Football Game Plan NFL All-32 show. David Hastigan here, and this week I'm joined by Troy Anthony, Football Game Plan correspondent. Alex Marinoni will join us later in the program. Emery Hunt is still scouting on location this week. Follow him on Twitter at FBallGamePlan for interviews and updates from him. Although I think he's just there for the food. I think the last time I checked, he's back home somewhere around the New Orleans area. We won't say where, just for his own privacy. But
filling his belly.
Exactly. You got to get beignets at Cafe Du Monde, don't you, folks? But anyway, we will have a whole big show to talk about here. We're talking Hall of Fame. We're talking scouting. We're talking coaches. But we have our Super Bowl matchup between the 49ers and the Chiefs, and it should be a terrific contest.
Definitely should. I mean, if there's one matchup you wanted to see, it's the 49ers defense against this high-flying Legion of Zoom Kansas City Chiefs.
It's going to be a lot of fun to watch, and we will get you ready for that next week. But first, let's get into the 4-minute offense.
Hey guys, Jennifer Madiwaika here with your 4-minute offense. And there's only one game left in the 2019 season, and it's a battle of the Reds. The red and gold San Francisco 49ers versus the red and white Kansas City Chiefs. These are two very solid teams with a very strong but different offense. 49ers Jimmy G played with an all-time great passer Tom Brady and has 2 rings already but prefers his game on the ground. This postseason, Jimmy has only thrown the ball 27 times but has rushed 89 times for 471 yards. This is a different strategy from Kyle Shanahan, who played very aggressively in Super Bowl 51 and lost in heartbreaking fashion. Patrick Mahomes, on the other hand, prefers to travel by air, throwing 70 times for 615 yards this postseason, while only rushing 48 times. The game should be a nail-biter, and early odds put Kansas City in favor by 1.5 points. Could this be the year Shanahan gets his revenge? Or is this the year Big Red Andy Reid finally gets a ring? We'll find out in less than 2 weeks. Andy Reid is one of the best coaches to never win a Super Bowl, so we've definitely got our eyes on him. Now let's take a quick look at a few key highlights of the teams going into this big game. Kyle Shanahan has already made a Super Bowl appearance but lost in Super Bowl 51, partly because the offense did not run the ball and run out the clock. Kansas City is the home team but could opt to wear their away jerseys. In the past, white jerseys have won 13 of the last 15 Super Bowls. And while San Fran is 5 for 6 in the Super Bowl, having lost Super Bowl 47, the Chiefs are 1 for 2 in the Super Bowl and have not appeared in 50 years. That's it for me. I'm Jennifer Madiwaika, and I'll be seeing you next time.
And again, we will cover the Super Bowl matchup in full next week. But this week, in the meantime, we decided we should focus on some other news and notes. And unfortunately, we had to talk about another career that has ended in its prime. Luke Kuechly retired abruptly last week after just 8 seasons in the league. This has been a growing trend, Troy. We've seen this from everywhere. It's not just one position either. It's wide receivers, it's running backs, players retiring right in the prime of their careers. Still being able to get into Hall of Fame ballots. We see that with Mr. Willis, who's in the finalists for this year's Hall of Fame. But is there anything that can really be done to address this? Is there any leading cause? Or is this just something that's going to be the new normal in the NFL?
I think this is really just a changing of times. I mean, previously you had NFL careers who, yes, the guys are making their money playing 11, 10, 15 years in the league, then retiring. Well, nowadays we have these guys coming into the league after playing hard college football, playing for 8 seasons, all the knowledge that we have now about CTE and what really happens to your body about playing all these years. But they also are getting these monster contracts where financially they're set up for life 8 or 9 years into their career. And ultimately, I think that's playing a huge part in whether or not they should walk away from the game.
And it's certainly a difference that we've seen. We've seen this with free agency when it really kind of took over, because it used to be you stuck with one team for most of your career. You're seeing that with a lot of the guys that are going into the Hall of Fame this year in this 2020 class. But with free agency, you saw it. But now you're right. You're starting to see where guys, the average NFL career still only lasts 2 to 3 seasons. So you don't really, is there nothing in your mind that you think could address this? Do you think increased player safety could address this, or contract situations, or is this just coaches have to adjust?
I mean, we've seen the NFL's influence on increased player safety, all the rules changes that they're making, so they're attempting to do that now. But like I said, I think it's just a changing of the times. We see countless players do it. Calvin Johnson, now Luke Kuechly, Anthony Davis walked away a few years back. The Ravens had his name is slipping my head, but a phenomenal offensive lineman who was also a genius in mathematics who walked away because he was afraid of losing the knowledge that he already had stored in his head. I think that it's just a changing of the guard, and I don't think there's a way that the NFL can stop it. It's each individual's own decision.
And obviously with the Panthers now, you already have the possibility of losing Cam Newton. Now you've lost your defensive leader in Luke Kuechly. With Matt Rule coming in as the new head coach there, it's going to be an interesting challenge for him.
It's going to be a hard challenge, but the good thing about the Panthers is they have a lot of leadership on both sides of the ball. I mean, yes, if Cam Newton does depart, you have Greg Olsen there, who's been in the league for years, who's very knowledgeable, solid veteran, who can lead that offense. And the defense has talent stacked across the board. So losing Luke Kuechly is definitely going to hurt, but like I said, they still have a lot of talent on that defense.
And again, this is not a condemnation of Luke Kuechly at all. We wish him the best in his retirement and whatever he decides to do next. I have a feeling, though, he might not be done with the game. When we return, we will talk about the players that have decided to skip their final college season and will enter the draft. Plus, we'll talk about who could be next year's San Francisco 49ers and go from worst to first, right here on the NFL All-32 show.
Football Game Plan is brought to you in part by Ninth and Lux. Visit the website, ninethandlux.com, and check out the clothing gallery. Do You Music, with featured artist IW in his latest album, Season 2. You can check that out on iTunes as well as doyoumusic.com. Nesby Phipps, art, life, entertainment. NesbyPhipps.com. Grind It Out Fitness. Visit the website, grinditoutfitness.com, and download the app.
Welcome back to the NFL All-32 show. David Hassagen here with Troy Anthony. And it's time to talk about comeback stories. We've seen some great ones this year, like in Tennessee, but the San Francisco 49ers have truly been extraordinary, going from the second overall pick to the Super Bowl. So that got us thinking, what team could be next? Troy, you're a betting man. You've gotten some decent picks this year on your best bets. Question is, who do you think is that team that can go from a top 5-ish pick to potentially a playoff team?
This is tough because it's like, okay, what bottom of the barrel team is just going to skyrocket to the top?
Right.
We've only seen it a few times. The San Francisco 49ers this season, the Indianapolis Colts after losing Peyton Manning and drafting Andrew Luck. But for me, I would be looking at the New York Giants in this one because, one, they're already in the NFC East, it was up in the air all season this year. And then you got the Philadelphia Eagles, who knows what they're going to be next year. The Dallas Cowboys have a new head coach. The Washington Redskins are going to have a new head coach and a second-year quarterback. Now, for the New York Giants, same situation. New head coach, second-year quarterback. But they were just a couple of players, a couple of key instances of being out of this division in this one. But with them having the 4th overall pick this year, I think that they have one of the better chances to go from worst to probably having a shot at winning their division.
Now,
this
what
year.
about the Detroit Lions? Because this is an interesting story with Matt Patricia. Obviously, he's on a very short leash. He's gotten rid of most of his coaching staff. A lot of pressure on him, but you think that there's a chance that he could be that guy as well?
Absolutely. The Detroit Lions were going to be the second team in this one. We've seen they were in a lot of competitive games this season. And to start off the season, they looked like they were going to be one of the hotter teams of the league. They just kind of fell off fast. They lost Matt Stafford early on in the year. So with Stafford coming back, I would like to see them shore up that running game a little bit more. Kerryon Johnson, they lost as well. He should be coming back. That division is extremely tough with the Packers and the Vikings in it, and the Bears should be bouncing back. But I think that they can, if they move around the right pieces, they could be competing for a nice wild card position.
And one team that intrigues me a lot is Cincinnati. Obviously, that would be the ultimate worst of first, going from number 1 overall pick to the playoffs. But when you look at this team, they only had 2 wins, but the number of games that came down to 1 score was quite impressive. This team stayed in a lot of ball games, should have won. They could have been around a 500 team. Maybe they're that one player away from being a playoff squad again.
They definitely did stay in a lot of ball games, and that's with Andy Dalton slinging the ball and him getting pulled for Finley and Finley slinging the ball. Now, this is assuming that they take Joe Burrow as that number 1 overall pick, and if Joe Burrow does work out, I mean, they're in the AFC North, which is extremely tough in and of itself. You got the Cleveland Browns, who are talent out the wazoo. You have the #1 seed in the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers with Big Ben coming back. I think it's going to be very tough for the Bengals to jump from worst to first.
Could be interesting, though, with an Ohio kid, if he does get that #1 selection, going back to his home state where he grew up and learned this game, could be huge for Cincinnati.
Feel-good story right there.
Definitely a feel-good story. And speaking of which, we've got all of these teams that are looking at their draft picks and their big boards. Well, the draft process is very much underway in terms of scouting. And while this year's class was already deep, there are some big names coming out a year early that has made it really, really exciting. Troy, you've looked at some of these guys. Who do you see as a guy that you think is coming out a year early that should be and is going to make an instant impact?
CeeDee Lamb. 2 wide receivers I give you. CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy. Both of these guys around 6'1", 190, can fly around the field. Both of them in back-to-back seasons had over 1,000 yards and double-digit touchdowns in the FCS. That's huge for receivers, and we know that with the receivers that have come out recently, like Marquise Brown and Terry McLaurin, guys who can immediately make an impact on their team, I think that those two probably going in the first round.
And obviously with Jeudy, you're talking about a guy coming out of Alabama. Is there anybody else you think the Crimson Tide fans should be saying, okay, this guy's going in the first 2 days?
Shockingly, I was surprised when Tua announced that he would be coming out of the draft early, especially with his injury. It's kind of unprecedented, one, at the quarterback position, and two, in today's football. We saw that injury back in the day with Bo Jackson. Well, we have new modern technology that can take care of it. I think that somebody takes a chance on Tua in the second round this year.
I think for me, personally, the Tua story is interesting because I think he should stay in another year and really prove himself. But at the same time, you can't understand, okay, I can get a better rehab possibly, although Alabama's facilities are outstanding. They might as well be an NFL team facility. But it's interesting to me that people have him rated so highly because outside of really 1 year, he really hasn't seen, we haven't seen much from him. We saw that with Mark Sanchez. He only played a year as a starter at USC before the Jets took him, and he started his career out nicely, and then he kind of fell off the face of the earth.
No, I 100% agree with all of that. I thought that he should have stayed another year as well. I had somebody arguing with me on Twitter, the rehab process will be better in the NFL. Well, I don't know how much better you're going to get than the Alabama facilities. But like I said, I was shocked that he came out this early. I thought that he would have returned for the year, for the extra year of rehab, to maybe be able to put together a pro day or a combine next season, because we're not going to see that this year. But that's what he decided to do, and I think that whatever NFL team does take the flyer on him is going to have that in mind, rehab him for the following season, and have a good quarterback sit there and mentor him for this season.
And I think one guy that is really going to be very under the radar that I've seen a couple times this year covering the FCS is Pete Carrero, the running back out of Monmouth. This was a guy that was an unknown. He was a third-string running back going into the season at Monmouth, and then he only goes and runs for almost 2,000 yards. He's a track star. He's got big size. It'll be interesting to see if either of the local teams take a flyer on him if he goes undrafted, because this is a guy that should be able to help his team out.
Yeah, Carrero out of Monmouth, I can see him going in the third day, but you got to keep in mind, this running back draft class is so deep this year. It goes for miles. A.J.
Dillon coming out of Boston College is one of the big names. Obviously, you've got running backs coming out of Wisconsin. You've got Etienne, who didn't come out of Clemson. He's staying behind for another year. That would have made it just an explosive draft class. But I think you're right, though, with the wide receiver position, with the guys you mentioned with CeeDee Lamb. This is going to be one of the deepest wide receiver classes where it's not going to be just, oh, we can get a guy in the third day that can be a star. No. You can get him all the way through this draft class. It'll be very interesting to watch. When we come back, stay with us here on the Game Plus Network, because after the commercial break, Alex Marinoni will join me to discuss some of the new coordinators that have been hired around the league, and we'll take a look at the Pro Football Hall of Fame senior class headed to Canton, right here on the NFL All-32 show. Don't go away.
Football Game Plan is brought to you in part by Financial Coaching LLC, investment, retirement, security. Stewardship Credit, financial growth is in your hands. StewardshipCredit.com. Adrienne Marie Photo, photographer, writer, management. AdrienneMariePhotography.com. Lock Multimedia.
Welcome back to the NFL All-32 show. Alex Marinoni joining me now. And Alex, with all the head coaching positions now filled, the coaching carousel now goes into overdrive as the coordinator positions begin to be taken. And we've seen some interesting hires, starting with Big Blue, who have decided to keep their old enemies closer, hiring Jason Garrett as their new offensive coordinator. A lot of people, when it first came out, were not exactly happy with the news. Now that we've had a few days to think about it, though, this might be a decent move for the Giants.
I actually love the move. I mean, you're getting a guy who is so familiar with the NFC East. Does anybody know the NFC East better right now than Jason Garrett? This guy's going to come in. His offenses have been great in Dallas. I mean, yards-wise, they led the league last year. They've been a top-5 offense for a long time, even when they didn't have a guy like Romo, and before they got Prescott and they struggled, they still moved the ball. They still had 1,000-yard rushers. You're bringing a guy who loves to feature the running back, and that's what this Giants offense needs, a guy who's going to feature Saquon Barkley. And yes, Barkley gets his touches, but he's going to find ways and make it a point to be creative with Barkley and make sure he is the focal point, and it's going to take the pressure off Daniel Jones. I really love this move.
It's going to be interesting to watch because, again, you've got so many weapons in New York that, yeah, they're not the big highlight name guys outside of Saquon, but they've done some nice things, especially at the wide receiver position, that you get a guy like Garrett involved, he's going to be a guy that can really put that into overdrive. Next one up here, a changing of the guard in Houston. Romeo Crennel out as the defensive coordinator there. Unsure whether or not he is actually going to retire or whether he will be given a senior position in Houston, but Anthony Weaver will be taking over. He is the defensive line coach in Houston. Houston staying in-house. Clearly they like the direction their defense is going, and so they've gone with Weaver as their new DC.
Yeah, this could be a nice little spark for this team. A little more energetic guy, younger guy that can that maybe the players have they've bought into his product that can maybe get more out of this defense. But Romeo Crennel is a household name. He's a football guy. He's been a guy who's been around. He's seen it all. He's won at the highest level you can as a defensive mind. As a senior advisor, it would be a great fit for him, whether it's in Houston or anywhere else. Having someone like Romeo Crennel with all of his knowledge and everything that he's brought to the game on the defensive side of the ball, having his oversight and his opinions on things that a struggling defense could take would be a good role for him at this point in his career.
And as much as offense has changed over the last even 5 years, but especially over the last 20 years in football, defense has always remained a constant. So you get a guy like Romeo Crennel who has seen literally everything on the defensive side of the ball. Certainly a good move for Houston, but I like the fact they've kept it in-house. Clearly, J.J. Watt likes him. That's going to be the key thing there. But having Merciless as well, that D-line has done some magic for Houston. Now they get in charge of the whole defense for Coach Weaver. And the last hire here is in Carolina. Phil Snow is the new defensive coordinator for the Panthers. He has been around football a little bit of everywhere, from the Pac-12 to the SEC to even a stint with the Detroit Lions. But the last 3 years, he has been the defensive coordinator at Baylor under Coach Rule. He has one of his own guys now in-house in Carolina. How big is that for him to really develop that confidence at the NFL level?
Absolutely. It's trust, and it's great that Carolina is giving Matt Rule the opportunity to bring in his guys, whether it's the college level or the professional level. These are guys that are going to buy into his product, and he's going to be a true head coach and be able to delegate what he wants. He's not going to grab the defensive genius and the offensive genius, and no matter what, it's their way or the highway. This is going to be Matt Rule's team, and this hiring is great for Phil Snow. I mean, he's coming from the Big 12. A conference that is not known for their defensive prowess at all. It's the high-scoring offenses, and he led Baylor to number 20 overall defense in college football, which is a great sign, especially for that conference. So this is a guy that knows what he's doing, and like you said, he fits with Matt Rule. They have the confidence with each other. This could be a great hire, but we'll definitely learn down the road.
And we've got a few more positions that we'll keep an eye on. I know Jacksonville is still looking. There's some rumors around Philadelphia as well, so we'll keep an eye on all those hires as they go forward. But as we move now into the final couple weeks here of the NFL season, we now know 15 of the 20 members of this year's Pro Football Hall of Fame class. Some very impressive names on this list that you can check out at NFL.com. But we're going to talk about just a few of them here. And we're going to start with one of the players on this list, Winston Hill. You're talking about a guy that was part of some of the early New York Jets teams, including their one Super Bowl win. Joe Namath gets a lot of the credit, but without Winston Hill, we wouldn't know who Joe Namath was.
Yeah, it's possible. Winston Hill was a pillar for that Super Bowl winning team and those great teams that the Jets had in the 60s and early 70s. Winston Hill was that guy that you never really talked about him. You talked about Joe Namath. He was Broadway Joe. You know what Maynard did and all these other players. But Winston Hill was always that constant that was always there. He was a left tackle for a long time. And the thing with linemen is that they don't really have the stats, and they didn't have the footage back then as much as we have it now to see the dominance. What we saw, or what we could go by, is other players' remarks on offensive linemen, and every opponent that has gone up against Winston Hill and all of his teammates have said he's just different. He is a Hall of Fame caliber player, and he was just the best player on the field when it came down to the offensive line. And if you're protecting Broadway Joe's backside, you know he's not going to keep quiet about it. So if he didn't say anything, that's typically a good thing.
And he is one of 10 senior players that the committee voted in. They also brought in 2 coaches in Bill Cowher and Jimmy Johnson. They also brought in 3 contributors to the game of football, and one of them is the former commissioner, Paul Tagliabue. This is a guy who was part of the NFL for some of their defining moments, some of the worst moments in this country's recent history. He's also overseen expansion. What does he really mean to the game, and obviously deserving of this honor?
I mean, Paul Tagliabue like you said, he's been through a rough part of the NFL or a rough part of our country, and having to be the leader of the NFL and having to involve the NFL. And he's done a great job through some tragedies, through some issues that the country was going on. He was able to step in and with the NFL's help and do things outside of the game that were big for the country itself. But as far as the product itself, he was part of the reason why this by the NFL has gone from maybe that sport 2 in America to sport number 1. When he was out in 2006, I think everybody was talking NFL football. I mean, Major League Baseball was taking a dip, and the true American sport became NFL football, and he's a big reason for that.
And we've seen, obviously, the expansion from 28 to the 32 teams we now see, including Carolina. We talked a lot about them. So Paul Tagliabue's legacy certainly will be seen for a long, long time on the game. And that last name that we have to talk about in terms of legacy is Steve Sabol, the longtime director and runner of NFL Films. And you talk about bringing the NFL to prominence. Baseball was still very much the sport in the 60s when NFL Films began. By the time Steve Sabol passed away in 2012, NFL Films was the thing and got the NFL to the top sport.
Absolutely. Steve Sabol is the reason why guys like us today know about the teams from the 60s, the 70s, why we're able to talk about Winston Hill today as we saw footage of him back then. Steve Sabol is a reason why football was really learned and grabbed onto, like you said, and took over from Major League Baseball footage and everything Major League Baseball had pastime-wise. Steve Sabol, and there's so much to say about Steve Sabol as far as what he's contributed and getting really involved into the football part of the game. We've seen shows like Hard Knocks, where they really focus on entertainment and grabbing the attention. Before that, it was learning the game, learning the players and the schemes, and really getting involved in football. And Steve Sabol was a big reason why that was known worldwide.
Exactly. And he wasn't just breaking down the plays. He wasn't a commentator. He didn't want the films to be commentators. It was the game. And you put him kind of in a similar category to John Madden as a commentator, where it was really about educating the fan. And that is what the legacy of NFL Films will continue to be long beyond this 100th year, into the 200 and beyond for the NFL. So we certainly want to congratulate all of 15 members, and the final 5 members will be announced the day before the Super Bowl in about 2 weeks, and their legacies will be enshrined in Canton, Ohio forever. That will do it for the Football Game Plan NFL All-32 show. Don't forget, for all your football knowledge, go to footballgameplan.com, where football makes sense. Go to SoundCloud or to iTunes, where you can listen to the NFL All-32 podcast with Emery Hunt, Troy Anthony, Alex Marinoni, and I talking about all the buzz across the NFL as we get you ready for all the news ahead. And next week, we will have your Super Bowl preview right there. So don't forget to subscribe. For Alex Marinoni and Troy Anthony, I'm David Hassagen saying have a great weekend, and so long for now.